I'm so glad to see you again. I'm so glad for you to see me again, too. And so I'm thankful for the chance to be with you once more today. I want to tell you today about a name Ichabod, Ichabod, Ichabod. I first became conscious of that name from two directions at roughly the same time. I grew up fast. I was one of the tallest boys in my grade school and very much so in high school. Even though it was a large high school, I was still one of the two tallest boys in the school. And I grew up as kind of a bag of bones at the same time. My mother would say so frequently, looking at me, seeing that I was again growing out of my sleeves so that my hands hung down too far with nothing to cover them, she'd say, "You look just like Ichabod Crane." Well, I came to know who Ichabod Crane was. He was that character in a Washington Irving novel or short story who was a pathetic creature because his clothes fit him so poorly and he hung out in all directions in his clothing. And I looked, she said, like Ichabod Crane. That was descriptive of anybody whose clothes couldn't keep up with the nature of the person's body. At about the same time, as a 10-year-old, well, just turned 11, I was reading the Bible through for the first time. And I read about the original Ichabod. That's quite a story, the original Ichabod. He was, well, let me back up and say, Israel suffered a tragic defeat in the field of battle against their great enemies of the time, the Philistines. In that battle, they killed the two sons of the great judge of the day, Eli, and the enemy, the Philistines, captured the Ark of the Covenant, the sacred repository for the nation of Israel, the symbol for them of their relationship with God. When they brought the news back to the land that Israel's army had been defeated, they delivered the message to people in general and delivered it specifically to a woman who was far advanced in her pregnancy, waiting daily, really, for her baby to be born. It was one of the two sons of Eli who was married to her, and this man had been killed in battle. They told her that. Then they told her also that her father-in-law, when he got the news of the defeat in battle and of the death of his sons, he fell over backwards, broke his neck in the falling backwards, and died. And now, with that information also, that the Ark of the Covenant of God had been taken, she went into the pangs of childbirth and brought forth her son. She had little to say as she brought him forth. After all, she had just become a widow. She had just lost the baby's grandfather before the baby was even born. The nation had lost its symbol of its relationship with God, and now she had a baby. She was still alive long enough to say a word to the midwife who delivered the baby. She said, "Name the baby Ichabod." Ichabod meant the glory has departed. She said, because the glory has departed from Israel, we've lost the Ark of the Covenant of God. That's my first story about Ichabod. Now, two quick future words. A great many years ago, I was working on an advanced degree in American history. And one of my assignments was to take a name or two or three to do research because they thought they should go as part of the Encyclopedia of Wisconsin history, doing this at the University of Wisconsin. A name they gave me was Ichabod Codding, Codding, and said, find the story about him wherever you can in your research so we can put it in this Encyclopedia of Wisconsin people. I discovered that he had been born shortly after his father had died, perhaps in the Civil War, though I'm not sure when. And so his mother, now a widow, said, I'll name him Ichabod, because the joy and glory of our family is gone. But the interesting thing is, Ichabod Codding grew up to be a minister of the gospel, and a very effective one, effective enough that they wanted to include him in this dictionary or encyclopedia of biography. Then, about 4 or 5 years ago, Mrs. Callis and I were vacationing in New England, and in one of those New England towns in Maine, I stopped in front of a church and saw a plaque in front of the church about another man named Ichabod. I don't recall the last name. And they told on the plaque that he'd been the minister of that church for over 40 years, back 100 years ago, and that he was a godly man that they wanted always to remember. And then they noted that his mother had named him Ichabod because his father had died before he was born, and the mother in sorrow named him The Glory Has Departed. And he too became a great, faithful man of God. All of which is to say, when you think of the name Ichabod, don't just think of Ichabod Crane. Don't just think that the glory has departed. Think of 2 women that I stumbled upon who named their children that way because they thought the glory of God was out of their lives. And it wasn't so. God still had wonders to perform, even with a child named Ichabod. That's what I wanted to tell you about today, and God bless you indeed.